All right.
He's the man of the hour with adventure and power, telling stories so bold from the wild and the cold. From Paradise Creek days to the journeys he raised, sharing lessons he's got. Every tale is the spot with a voice to be heard, painted clear with each word. Living deep in the wild, fearless, free and beguiled. Through the nights that he fought and the dreams that he caught. Here he is tonight, the one and only David Scott.
Everybody, welcome to the show, The Real Story with Nathaniel. I have the honor of introducing you to, and if you've seen it before, you know this is going to be a great interview. Our guest here tonight is David Scott, adventurer and author. He spent a year living in the subarctics of Canada with a partner, and well, the story starts bad. We're going to get into all that. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, go out and get it. It is called Paradise Creek. It's on Amazon. It's available now. I just got done reading it, and David, great job. It was, for me, a to the point and very present tale of survival and adventure, and just your love of what you were doing, even though you nearly lost your life a time or two or more. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you survived so you could come here and tell us about it, but there were some scary parts in that story.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on. And secondly, thank you for that brilliant intro. It was amazing. I loved it. That
Good
was
job,
fantastic. Josh. It was brilliant. This whole story kind of started as, at least for me, a bit of a childhood dream. I spent all my time in the outdoors as a kid. When I was very young, my parents got rid of our television set. And so for about 13 years, I grew up without a TV, and this kind of forced me to do other things to entertain myself. And of course, this is at that wonderful time that we all know when pretty much all the children were feral, wild animals running around,
Time.
And so, yeah, when I came home from school, I would disappear into the woods. I would come home at dark, smelling like wood smoke and covered in mud. And
now, were you like me in that you could actually eat off of you knew where every fruit tree was, everything you could eat, where all the onion grass was? You could survive for a full day without going home for food. Were you that kid too?
Pretty much so. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love that.
Especially out in the woods. It was very much my domain. I loved it out there. I spent all my time out there. And there was one day where I found this arrowhead in a farmer's field. I was maybe 12 years old, something like that. And it just blew my mind that I was holding this thing, knowing the last person that held it was a Native American. And so I just started reading everything I could read and learning about these skills, about how to live, I guess, more primitively in the outdoors. And that's really kind of where all of this started.
Did you have the Foxfire books handy by any chance?
I did.
I had those as a kid, and there was so much knowledge.
Yeah, they're such good books. And so yeah, I would study those. Any book on the subject. One book in particular that really stands out. And I mention this just because I've heard other people interviewed that do similar things, and they all seem to reference this book, and it's My Side of the Mountain, about a kid who runs away in the Catskill Mountains and lives off the land. And this to me was, I wanted to be that person, And I started having this dream about wanting to do that, but for me, it was northern Canada for some reason. I don't even really know where that came from. Maybe just because it's such a vast wilderness. And I even wrote a story about it when I was like in 7th or 8th grade, about running away, living in the middle of nowhere in a log cabin in northern Canada. So it's kind of amazing how that came to
That should have been
fruition.
the forward to your book.
Yeah,
If you
right.
still had it. For me, I remember seeing or going to the museum at that age, and then learning about the Inuit
Hmm.
and the native people, and thinking that is a brutal life. That is so hard. How do they do it? And that's when I kind of like got curious about Northern Canada and what you need to do to survive. Even to this day, if there's a good documentary on YouTube, I will click on it, even if it's stuff I think I've already seen a billion times, just because I always learn something new.
Sure.
Usually I learn something new. So that's where I got a similar fascination. I think there's also some Disney made for TV, like nature things that would talk about land that wasn't in my backyard. And I had that fascination as well. I just like the creature comforts a lot. I
Yeah.
was a computer nerd. When you were that age, say like 16, what besides loving the outdoors, what kind of kid were you? Were you like the jock? Were you the nerd? Were you who
You
were
know, I
you?
was actually, oddly enough, my senior year, I was voted most likable, which I really thought was a great honor at the time.
I think so,
And
sure.
and I'm still flattered by it, but clearly I'm not getting getting all the girls by being the nicest guy, and you know what I mean? Like,
That's true.
uh, it just is bad, just comes with the territory. I was very much a friend to all, so I could very easily mingle in any of the cliques, any of the groups. I had friends in all of those places because I, you know, there was always something to kind of learn or to experience when hanging out with some of these different people rather than just sticking with a certain clique. So I'm happy that things went that way. You know,
Yeah.
it was good.
It's that that's one of the reasons this show exists, is because I love talking to people who have lived lives that I haven't. Even
Hmm.
when I was younger, I would find myself, there's more gravity towards somebody whose life I didn't already live. Like, I know what it's like to grow up as this guy in this community. Oh, you're from a different country and you lived life like this? Tell me about
Yeah,
it. Let's hang out.
sure,
And
sure.
that's I think that's a great way to look at the world, is like everything's a learning opportunity. Everyone, as long as you don't use them as books, you know. But
Yeah,
I'm quite upfront. Like, I want to talk to you because you did this.
yeah,
That's
sure.
what I like about it. And then, you know, sometimes you make friends and you always learn something anyway. The reason I asked that though, about who you were as a kid, when you went away, I'm going to jump ahead and back a little bit. You went away. You're at 19 years old. You go away for a year. You're doing something that at that age to your peers had to seem a little out there. You come back. How did you see a perception of you change when you were back? When you were around those
Wow.
people again, a class reunion, or even bumping somebody into a store?
No, you mean how others perceived me
Yeah,
when
did
I
you
came back?
perceive that they perceived you differently?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think just because of I think everyone was very much aware of the fact that I lived and breathed the outdoors. It just it
It
was
was like
part of my
naturally you did
makeup.
it.
And so I don't think there was any big surprise, at least amongst my peers, that I was, you know, running off and living in the middle of nowhere. Now, for some of the adults, for example, prior to going up there, um, and you know, this was a different time, 1991. I mean, you're expected, once you get out of high school, you're expected to go to college, and that, I mean, that's just what you do. There's no like gap year or anything. I mean, like
Can't
you
take
just
that year off. You'll never go.
no. So so when I would explain to people what I was doing, there was, you know, I had to battle that a little bit just to, you know, because you're kind of breaking away from that. And immediately people are like, oh, you know, what are you going to do? You're never going to find a job, blah, blah, blah. And I think in the end, I think I made the right choice.
You made the right choice. You
Yeah,
made the right
definitely.
choice. I'm jealous that I didn't. I like the creature comforts too much. I just, you know, I knew that I liked the idea of it. And to this day, I spend every other weekend in the woods, usually alone. It's a camper because now I'm old. But I'm surrounded by trees. I have to be. I love it. That's my Zen place. So that's when we started talking. That's why I was very interested in talking to you on the show, because I think we have I think a lot of people have this kinship, whether they can spend a year away or even a week sometimes, or even in a difficult environment at a certain age. Like, I know that there's certain things I will never do again, especially alone, because if I get injured now, or like it's a worse situation. So yeah, I think you did the right thing. You did it at the age when you could do that stuff.
Totally.
When you could hitchhike across Europe, when you could get lost in the woods, when you could
Right.
take a chance. That's the time to make the big mistake. And yours wasn't. Having read the book, yours, we will get into that because I think it changed your life in so many positive ways that
Totally.
I'm sure you're aware of, but that's what I got out of the book too. What I did want to know is, before you went on a trip, we're about to get into the trip part. So how did you meet Doc Forgy? Forgy?
Well, yeah, Forgy. That's correct. So Doc Forgy, or Dr. William Forgy, but Doc, as he's called by his friends. He first off, he is a renowned author on the topic of wilderness medicine and also hypothermia, cold weather injuries, and things like that. And he built this cabin in the early 70s. He and I came to learn after meeting him, we have a lot of common interests. And Doc also, aside from being a physician, he's a hell of an entrepreneur. Like, he has projects going all the time. And he, again, in the very early 70s, started up a camping store that really ended up doing quite well. It was called Indiana Camp Supply. And because of my interest in the outdoors, I obviously visited this store quite a few times and ended up getting a job there. And the owner told me about the founder, Doc, and told me that the Doc had built this cabin in the middle of Canada. And of course, my ears perked up the second I heard it. And I was locked on. And one day, Doc came into the store, and the owner said, "Yeah, this is Doc." And I walked up to him. I extended my hand to shake his hand. I didn't even say my name or introduce myself. I just said, "I have to go to this cabin." That's all I said to him. And he said, "Well, we'll see what we can do to get you up there." And that was it. And I've later learned that if you show interest like that to Doc specifically, if you show that much interest, he will lasso you in and help you, point you in that direction. He'll help make that happen. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. He's one of those. He's an opportunity maker. But still, at the time, I'm thinking this is never gonna happen. And it was maybe about a year after that, I of course had met my trip partner Scott Power prior to this.
Yeah, can we go into how you met him? Or
yep, I actually met him at Indiana Camp Supply. So he was working there. I went in one day I was going on a trip to work with a group called the SCA, which is the Student Conservation Association. And so I was kind of preparing for this trip, and I went to Indiana Camp Supply. Scott was working there part-time. And at the time, he was preparing to go to the cabin with a large group, a group of kind of outdoor leaders, a group called the WEA, the Wilderness Education Association, with this group and with Doc. And this is 1989. This was going to be his first time camping in a tent. And when he got there, he was so struck by this place and by this cabin. And he mentioned to Doc, he said, I want to stay here. I want to come and stay here for an extended period. So, of course, again, as soon as I mentioned my interest to Doc, Doc was already putting the pieces together, I think. But anyway, Scott was telling me about his getting ready for his trip up to Canada, and I was telling him about my getting ready for going. I was going out west, and so yeah, that's kind of where we met. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we get into Doc making this happen, and you getting the okay.
Yeah, so it was literally just, I got a phone call from Scott, And he said, how would you be interested in doing this, in going and staying for a year in this place? And I mean, without hesitation, even though I'd only known Scott like for a year and a half or so. We hadn't really hung out or anything.
Right.
But that's a good thing, because, if you go up there with your best friend or something, you're not going to have anything to talk about. You're not going to, so it's,
He knows your stories.
yeah, all the stories have been told. And so I immediately agreed, and we immediately began planning. So we had about a 2-year time period to really pull together the gear that we needed, and to also go through some really extensive medical training with Doc. Just because once we get dropped off there, we're cut off. There's no communication. You may be able to signal a plane, but that's a hit or miss. You just don't know. So we had to go through a lot of kind of medical training. And Scott and I also, in that 2-year time, we also took several smaller kind of trips just to see how we vibe together, and make sure that we're not going to get up there and
Kill each other, essentially. Yeah.
I didn't want to use that word, because
with
the whole YouTube thing. But we, so we wanted to make sure that we worked well together, and we're both people that are very easygoing, and so I think that it was clear that we were gonna work well together.
Nice. Yeah. Plus, they have to have work ethic too. I couldn't imagine a worse trip than going to woods and fun. I don't really like chopping wood. I don't really like. We have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a problem.
So after all this preparation, I have one question that I had throughout your entire book, and I'm glad I have you here to ask it. You're going away to subarctic Canada for a year alone, no communication, essentially. Why did you go in January?
Oh, it's a great question, and there's a fairly good answer, I think. When we fly into this place, and to give you an idea, a scope of how far away this place is, we drove from Chicago to Winnipeg. That was about a 15-hour drive. And from Winnipeg, we take a train to Thompson. That's about a little over a day train ride. And then you take an hour and a half bush flight to get to this place. It's out there. It's way out there. And when you land, you have to land on a lake that's about, it's a long, narrow lake, about a mile long. And you have to hike then 3 miles to reach the cabin. The country is muskeg swamp up there. It's walking on that in the summertime. It's vegetation on top of water. So walking on it in the summer is like walking on a waterbed, and carrying 2,000 pounds of gear back and forth, to shuttling that over the cabin in the summer with the bugs on top of that. That's a lot of heavy lifting. So we figured middle of winter, we'll go in and we'll be able to easily sled gear across to the cabin, and it'll just make things easier in terms of getting all the gear over there. Yeah,
that makes sense now. I was wondering, like, couldn't you just,
yeah.
But yeah, no, that does make sense. The you guys, spoiler alert if you haven't read the book yet, they get lost due to a navigational error between landing on the water and getting to the cabin, and you spent 6 nights in a bivouac, a lean-to of the least strict definition, I think. There's several pictures. It kept you alive, so it did its job. But 6 days.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't think that the bivouac necessarily kept us alive, but the act of constructing that, of taking, realizing you're in a survival situation, realizing there's an emergency here, the act of taking action, of making a decision and doing something, I think that's what saved us. Just if I were to go back, and also the fact that we were 19 years old. I mean, you're invincible at that age, So that naivety and that age, you can kind of stupid your way through just about anything. So and luck, of course, played a part.
There's a lyric by the band Rush. You're only immortal for a limited time.
Yeah, right.
When we were young.
Yeah.
And I know that feeling. But so in those six nights, you do cover a lot of it in the book. And were there stories that you left out or conversations you had at that time? Like you had to be in some dark places. How did you keep your spirits up? Or were there points where you're just like, this is probably it? What were those days like emotionally? Because you did touch on that, but I'm just curious. 6 days is a long time. That could have been an entire book for some authors.
Yeah,
How
definitely.
did you get? I know you were hiking a lot, trying to find where the cabin is during the days, but at night when you're defeated, wow.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, really, the first 3 days were by far the most challenging. I mean, and there was a tremendous amount of frustration, just given the fact that we'd planned so long for this. I dreamt about doing this my whole life, and on the first day, we get punched in the face, and this came as quite a shock. I even the most experienced outdoors people, mistakes happen, or something that you didn't predict or plan for. I mean, that's just part of the game. And so there was frustration there, but I think we were too much in the throes of it to kind of dwell on that. We were, we had a clear goal, and our lives kind of depended on it. So we were very much focused on we need to figure this out. And one of the biggest or weirdest things, I guess, especially that first night, when it's 40-ish, pushing 40 degrees below zero. And
Fahrenheit. I always had to remind myself of that too, because you're in Canada, but this is Fahrenheit.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, 40 is, I think, the same in Celsius.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, actually, 40 it's 40.
Yeah.
40.
But bottom line is, it's cold. It's really cold, and I can remember just being. I can remember laying there that first night and thinking, we're going to be okay. Like someone's going to help us. Like you just, because you're so used to never being in a situation where you can't reach out for help. You're rarely in that situation. You can always call someone. So in the back of my mind, I was always thinking like, well, somebody's going to help, like,
got to be a trapper around.
Yeah, there's got to be something. And no, you just, the wilderness is quiet, and it's just kind of crushing down on you. And so I do remember thinking that, but really most of it was just laser focus on resolving the problem and trying to actually get on with this trip that we'd been planning for years. So
I think the move to go back and get some of the supplies was necessary, but that was one of the smarter moves in my mind that you made at that time. I was torn on climbing the tree to get the lay of the land, especially when you're alone.
Yeah.
Do you, looking back, would you recommend that now? I'm just curious if you thought it was then and now. Do you think that was a mistake? I mean, it saved your life. It was the right thing to do. We know that now. But in the moment, that terrifies me, because I'm thinking all the time, climb a tree and look around. But I'm like, that's a bad idea, especially in winter when you're covered in winter gear and one slip.
Well, also to add to that, these are spruce trees. So most of the spruce trees up there are very stunted just from the environment. This was a massive tree, but even the larger trees, the limbs on these trees are not much, they're maybe as thick as your wrist, maybe, but most of the limbs are about as thick as your thumb, and very brittle. And so yeah, the the danger of that was extremely high. And it's funny, I've heard so many other stories about people that have been lost, and I can't tell you how many times the answer for them has been to climb something, whether or not it solved the problem. They just felt this need to climb and to get kind of a bird's eye view. For us, it was, given how flat that terrain is, it definitely was the turning point. It definitely saved us. I was very much aware of the risk, and as you mentioned, with all of the winter gear, trying to navigate up these tangled limbs, it was a nightmare, and it was scary because again, like you said, if you fall, then you're both screwed. Then you're both in big trouble. But luckily, it paid off and worked for us in the end.
So in that moment, you saved your own life, but you saved someone else's. Do you ever look back and you think, I saved a life?
No, I don't. But Scott mentions that all the time. He says that all the time. Like, yeah, this guy saved my life, and
That's right. Just so Scott's right.
Yeah,
you risked your life to save. I mean, it was to save you too. But you did save a life.
I was thinking thinking of me. The hell with him. Yeah.
If the story ended, and then I found the cabin and I just stayed there and warmed up, and I'll go get Scott some other day.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'll come back in a few days.
More food for me.
Frankly, I think throughout the course of that trip, there were probably there were times where I think we'd both kind of saved each other's lives at one point
100%.
or another. Definitely. So, and that's just part of it.
So I had this question a little bit further down on my list, but I wanted to ask about your relationship with Scott in the moment, and then we can come back to it later on. But you're still essentially strangers living in a very stressful, some days situation. I know you described some very beautiful days and some very beautiful activities, fishing and exploring. Sure. But you're also stuck in a cabin with somebody for some bad weather and for months at a time, sometimes not stuck in. I know you guys went on explorations then too, but you're there, one person, and totally. It's essentially a marriage.
Yeah.
Did you get along in that moment most of the time where they're like, well, I'm not talking to you for 3 weeks? Is that even okay to ask?
Look, we occasionally took shots at each other with the rifle, but only occasionally. And they were just warning shots. They were.
I've heard about how good of a shot you are.
Yeah, right. It is a balancing act. There's a great line by an outdoor writer. His name is Calvin Rutstrom, and he talks about staying an extended period of time with another person in a situation similar to this. And the question he asks is, how do you tell someone that you hate their guts just by the way they hold their fork? And it can come down to something so trivial. Like, there's just little things that people do that just grate on you or can grate on you. And luckily, for the most part, we managed to keep a pretty even keel. After we built the second log cabin, that really was, we didn't plan it this way, but we built another log cabin while we were there. And the benefit of this cabin was, because we were the benefit of it was, if tensions did get tight, you could just say, you know what, I think I'm going to go hang out at the Paradise Creek cabin, and you would go up there and you would spend 5 days alone, and then you'd start to get really sick of yourself, and bored with your own company. Like, I got to talk to somebody, and then you'd want to get back, and everything would be cool. So it definitely helped. That was a huge, I think, because by that point, by the time we built this other cabin, we'd now been there for 6 months, 7 months, something like that. So, initially it was all fine and good, but then after 7 months, you're starting to notice some of those grating things, and that happened frequently with both of us, where it's like, I'm gonna go hang out up here, and you know, and it was really helpful to have that.
I had a question in that area, in that I have taken cold mountain stream bucket water showers slash baths.
Mhm.
How do you do that in 40 degrees below zero to have any semblance of being clean? Or do you even try?
No, you definitely do. We had this huge galvanized tub, right? And you wouldn't like climb in it, but you would essentially just kind of use it to heat up a thing of water on the stove and use it to wash your hair and stuff like that. The bottom line is, when we left there, we were ripe as hell. I mean, it was definitely funky. It was, some of the gear and stuff that I brought back. I mean, if I still had it, I'm sure you could still probably smell, the wood smoke, and it was, you're pretty funky after that. But we did our best to kind of, keep ourselves relatively clean and keep hygiene in order. Yeah.
You mentioned the Paradise Creek cabin, and I loved that story. I'm so glad you included it. It sets up so much more of your life, of your legacy. I know there's a sad part to that story too, but when I saw you were doing that, and then you guys came together and worked together, and the land left its imprint on you, but you left yours on the land as well, which I saw a circle there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, now I'm here. This is I have proof. Your name's was on the wooden plaque in the cabin. This is what we did. Josh had a question around this. I'm encouraging him to pop on now and ask. I'm curious what your answer is going to be. Josh, you around?
Yeah. There was a point when you were building the second cabin, I think after you had done the initial work, you guys had gone back together, and you mentioned that you had decided to switch where you were logging from. Mm-hmm. And I'm certainly not questioning your decision. I'm just curious why you made it, because you had mentioned it, but I didn't understand why. And I was just curious what the answer was there.
I'm gonna have to see if I can remember this. I know initially, when we first started building the cabin, we were building it using the very trees that I climbed to find that lake. So this is where Paradise Creek is. It's a mile upstream from where the bivouac was, just because of the size of these trees. And all of these trees were growing on a little feeder stream that we called Paradise Creek that rolled into the river. So we cut several of these down to at least for the base of this cabin. My guess is, and I can't remember why we switched sites, but if I were to guess,
a weirdly specific question, sorry.
No, it's great. My guess is, though, why we decided to do that was because this little stream that runs right next to the cabin, I mean, there's a reason we called it Paradise Creek. It was just this spectacular scene. So the thought of kind of logging that out was I think starting to bum us out a little bit. Like we didn't want to just clear all of these great trees from this one spot. So we decided to go upstream, maybe about a half a mile or so, just to cut some of the logs from there and then float them down the river.
No, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
I was thinking you don't chop down your favorite view.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Also, I do know I've heard other stories where you're not supposed to. You make sure where your cabin is safe, but you leave dead wood nearby in case you do have an emergency where you have to go out and get something. So you want to leave trees near you, kind of alone, so they can become dead wood or become food, emergency wood. I just learned that recently. Actually, I never thought about it, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that definitely. I know Doc, when he built his cabin, he refused. In fact, he would get upset if you were kind of being lazy and cutting firewood right next to the cabin when it wasn't like a dire situation. If you were just I don't want to go hike across the river to get firewood. I'm just going to cut it here. It would piss him off. So yeah, we didn't do that.
Get the hardwood while you can.
Yeah, right, right.
And it makes a ton of sense. Now, when you finalized the plans for the cabin, was Doc involved with the final plans? Because at this point, you both were building it. You started off, you did the footer. Scott came in, you built it up some more. It wasn't quite done, I don't believe, when Doc showed up. You had like several courses up and no roof yet. Did he help you design the final thing? Was this like a larger group effort, or you pretty much stuck with what you and Scott wanted to do?
No, I mean, he offered some advice based on his experience. He had no idea we were building this. So, and that's another, aside from being kind of an opportunity maker, he just gets excited with when he sees somebody who's interested, who's really taking advantage of the opportunity. And so he has always been very much like, hey, you guys got this. This is in your hands. He didn't want to come in and kind of take control or anything. He was respectful enough to be like, this is your trip. And so yeah, he definitely gave us some pointers in terms of, because Scott and I'd never built a log cabin. We had no idea really. We played with Lincoln logs as kids. That's about the extent of our knowledge, or read Firefox books. So we had an idea. But we were kind of winging it, and ended up with just a beautiful log cabin.
I liked the pictures. They were more impressive than I expected when I got to the picture. I'm like, oh wow, they really built a real log cabin. It's not just we stacked some logs in a way. I'm sad that it's gone. Again, spoilers. We will catch up to that. But before we do, I wanted to talk about the moose hunt.
Sure.
It was a large part of the story of survival. Real quick, I just wanted to ask, did you bring enough? I mean, you were also fishing and birds and other small game. If you hadn't got the moose, would you have survived as well, like food wise, calorie wise?
Protein would have been the big problem, because we had plenty of food, but it was kind of very starchy. A lot of freeze-dried meals, and then a lot of the staples, the flour, salt, sugar, and then any kind of non-perishables that we could bring in. So having fresh protein, especially in the winter, is huge. And so in that respect, it really was beneficial. The meat that we smoked maybe 120, maybe 150 pounds of moose meat that also, we would take that with us if we went on trips away from the cabin, and you just use it, cut it up and put it in freeze-dried food, or just eat it as is. That was a real huge benefit. And also, we're meat eaters, and when you go without a fresh piece of steak or something like that for a long time, you definitely start to crave it. So it was hugely helpful.
My reading of your words was that it was not essentially survival, but it was a spiritual thing as well. There was something not to prove, but something to be part of the ecosystem, that you felt like that this was almost a test. He was coming, he was testing you, you were testing him, your resolve. All these things were in my head going on while reading your words. I just wanted to see if I'm off base with some of that, because to me, it didn't just look like I want to shoot something. That was never there. And it wasn't like I need it or we're going to die. It was, this is part of why we're here, to have this whole experience and to learn and test. And, am I right in assuming that? Like,
absolutely. Yeah. I had done, but prior to going on this trip, I used to do a lot of hunting, and I can remember shooting my first deer with a bow, and it really, for some reason, it just bummed me out. It was like, here's this, and I have nothing against hunting, or I'm all for it, but for me personally, after I shot that, it was just kind of this, I don't know. I felt something and I just stopped. I just didn't go anymore. And when I shot the moose, there was none of that. It was just, yeah, this is part of it. This is this cycle. And we had tremendous respect for this animal.
Yeah, you
Um,
buried it.
yeah,
The remains.
yeah. We made our own little kind of grave marker there for the moose. We used as much of it as we could, as much of it as we knew how to use.
Right.
And I think calling it a spiritual thing, I think, when you're hunting for the sake of food that you're putting on your table, I think it is a spiritual thing. There's, uh, it's all part of it. I mean, that's just how things work up there. It's life and death, and there's like no gray area, for Mother Nature.
You learned it was life or death night one. Like,
Yeah, right, right.
This is somebody else's stage you're on now.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm only afraid of. There's very few animals I'm afraid of in my local woods, and a moose is not something I'm going to run into here. But I have seen a moose in real life. Is there any way we can impress upon people how big a moose really is? Like when you're there.
I don't think there is. I don't think there's a way you can, until you see one up close in person. It's a staggering animal. I saw one once when I was working with the SCA at a distance, but standing or being close to this. There was one time, for example, I was canoeing upstream. We had not shot the moose yet, or a moose yet, and I noticed when I kind of came around this bend, there's a spot where there's quite an eddy and the water is really calm, but I noticed there was a lot of ripples, but there was nothing in the water. And the moment I came around that bend, this moose comes up out of the water. He was completely submerged, and he came out of the water, and it was like a submarine. I mean, it took my breath away, and I thought, Jesus, that thing is huge. It's still, and it's standing in the water kind of up to its shoulder. So I couldn't see just how huge it was. And then it came out of the water, jumped up on the bank, and I was blown away by how these things are massive, weird, prehistoric looking, beautiful animals. And to think with these giant antlers that this thing can navigate through that country, it's beyond comprehension. I can't even. Yeah, they're pretty fascinating, and they are pretty terrifying. You definitely need to be. You definitely need to use
Beware.
caution when
Be
yeah,
respectful.
absolutely.
This isn't a United States deer.
Yeah,
This
isn't
is
Bullwinkle. This thing will trample you right into the ground and
not even notice.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
I try to explain to people, like, the horns on its head are too heavy for you to carry, and it's on its head. That's how
Yeah.
big this thing is.
Yeah.
Like they're so, like, when I'm reading the story, I'm just like, I understand. I when you tell the story when you had the sights like full of deer, I still don't know like where that shot went. I'm sure you don't know where that shot went because they're so big, and in your whole head, you're like, how do I miss that?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know how it happens too. Like it sometimes you're not there, it's not there. And then your last shot, the way you describe it, I've had shots like that where you just know,
Yeah.
where that bullet landed.
Yeah.
It's a great story. It is a fantastic story of a hunt. I loved it. It could have been its own story again. This is a reason to buy your book. By the way, it's down in a corner, Paradise Creek, available on Amazon. I do want to plug it because as everybody who watches the show knows, when I read or review something I like, I will absolutely gush about it. This was a fun, fast read, and the moose story was one of my favorites. The First Night of Terror was there. I liked the Paradise Creek cabin building. In fact, that's the name of the book. If you could go back in time and spend one night at one of the cabins, you gotta have to pick only one. Which one would you pick? Yours or Doc's?
Wow, that's a great question. You know, probably docks because it was a more comfortable cabin. You know, we
Full
didn't
size door.
we didn't have you know, being the age that we were, we didn't know things like mechanical advantage, and so we built the cabin as big as we could, but we're like carrying these you know, we're not using like block and tackle, or you know, we're just like
Pivot points in the middle of the log, or yeah.
it is blood, sweat, and tears. And so the cabin was pretty small. The cabin that we built was maybe on the inside maybe 10 by 10, and it had a set of bunks that again were as big and accommodating as we could make them. But if you had to sleep on that bottom bunk, it was a bit like being in a coffin. It was very uncomfortable. So yeah, probably docks, just because you got a little more leg room and it's a little more comfy.
So I wanted to ask, well, first off, I want to know who you are now. I'm sure it wasn't your last outdoor adventure, but what do you do during the day? What is your life as a human being like now? Where did this all leave you as a human?
Well, it's weird, you know, when I came back, if you had asked me prior to going up there, what, you know, where do you see yourself going? It's sure I would have absolutely answered, well, something in the outdoors. I'm definitely going to do something in the outdoors. And when I came home, I noticed that this drive to be in the outdoors was no longer there. And it was almost a trauma for me, because it was like losing my religion. It was like,
I get that. I get
I,
that.
I just absolutely thought this is where the path is going. And now I come home and I'm like, what's going on? So I thought, well, maybe it's because I live in Indiana. It's not quite the hotbed of outdoor activity. So I moved to Colorado thinking maybe the Rockies, maybe the mountains, maybe that will, you know, stir this up. And I was there for about a year and I'm like, it's not doing it. And I really kind of went into a dark place, just not knowing what am I going to do now? And here I've got this encyclopedic knowledge of this, you know, the outdoors and these skills, and what now? So this was right around the time, you know, the internet started kind of, you know, becoming a bit more prevalent, and I suddenly found myself kind of playing with computers and got sucked into that. And because you know, I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of you know, graphics and video and things like that. All these interests in music, all of these interests are, I can use this incredible tool to access this and to enhance it. And before I knew it, I just done a 180 and kind of fell in love with you know, with working with these machines, and became a director at an ad agency here in Chicago, which I did for maybe another 20 years or so. And but the funny thing is, now I'm at, you know, these are like 20-year cycles. So it was like 20 years for the outdoors. It was like 20 years for the computers. And now I can feel myself already like I'm burning out on computers, because for some reason, I just started building things in my garage, just like woodworking or leathercraft, or, you know, just making stuff with my hands that was tangible. It wasn't ones and zeros. And so I feel I'm right now at another one of these forks in the road. I don't know where the fork is going, but you know, I've learned well enough to know, like, you can't fight it. You know, this is just, you just got to, you're on the river, and wherever that thing winds, why, that's where you go. So that's kind of what I'm doing now.
You know, David, I think the thing is, you're a true explorer. You know, you went and you explored. You had a thing you wanted to do, and it involved the exploring yourself, the land, everything around it, the hobby, the lifestyle. You had to explore that. You did it. It's not that you're done with it. I'm sure you've went out again and done some other, sure, you know, even if it's I know you've went back. In fact, computers were new and exciting at the time. So I was with you. I jumped in and I was exploring. I was like, what is Usenet? What is IRC? What is,
Yeah.
and you start getting and you're growing, and like the internet's, and you're part of helping that grow. That's exploring too. And similar to you, like I also decided to start doing more things with my hands, repairing or restoring old tools. It seems fun. Or my grandfather built a hutch, and I tore something else apart in preparation to learn how to do it for that, to do a
Yeah.
proper job on another. It's exploring. And I think that if I were to define you, besides author, you're clearly an author. In the pre-show, you mentioned you wrote that book shortly after you got back. You were an author then. I don't know. You have a lot of talents that I don't think you've changed in your focus, but I think at your heart, for me, you're an explorer.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's a fair assessment. I found that, once I become interested in something, I'll dive in. I get this from my dad, because my dad does this as well. I will dive into it to a point where the rest of the world will disappear. If I'm deep in a woodworking project or something like that, my wife will occasionally have to tell me, like, hey, don't forget to eat, or hey, you need to come to bed. And it's like time just disappear. You get in that flow state, and I'll take it way beyond what I think people normally would, and then it just disappears. It just goes away, and it's like it's a very weird thing, but I'm embracing it, and just trying to realize, like, hey, that this is how this works, and don't fight it, just roll with it.
As long as you're comfortable with it,
Yeah.
I've went through a lot of changes as well, and I just, as long as I'm comfortable with it, I know who I am. That's a great thing at being at a certain age. You know who you are. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I take not risks, but I'm not stuck. I got a tattoo in my late 40s because why not?
Yeah, sure.
My whole
Sure.
life I didn't hate them. I just never got one. I was like, why not?
Yeah.
So I got to wrap it up because we only have 10 minutes left, and I really appreciate your time. But you went back to the cabin 2 more times, according to the timeline on your site. The first time you went back solo, correct?
Actually, Scott went back solo.
Scott went back solo. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought you did after that, and then you went back together at some point.
No, I never, and I do regret never having spent solo time there. Prior to this trip, my big dream was to go solo entirely. And I realized after getting up there, like, that's just crazy. There are people that can do it. Clearly, there's people doing it now. I am not one of those people. It would be way too hard and kind of tragic, because you're not sharing it with somebody else. You're seeing all these great things and you got no one to tell it to. I've made, actually, I think 4 or 5 trips back, but only 2 of them had been with Scott, and each one was uniquely challenging. I mean, obviously, we're much older, and so that you're not 19 anymore, and you definitely feel it in your bones when you go up there and do that level of work. But yeah, so I made 2 trips up there with him, and then three with some other people.
So in 2014, you went back to survey the land to build a new cabin.
That was the goal. Like, so in 2007, we received word from a friend of ours who works for Manitoba Hydro. So he flies helicopters over this country often. And he called to let us know that there was a huge forest fire that ripped through that country and just decimated both of those cabins. So Scott and I returned in 2014 to kind of survey the land as best we could to see if there were maybe other opportunities, and also to just to kind of get some closure on the loss of our cabin. So we wanted to kind of see the remains of these things. So the trip was physically difficult and emotionally difficult. It was definitely was trying, for sure.
I saw some pictures. I'm one of those people that hates to have things taken away, and I just hope in some level that you guys find a way to put a cabin back there for other people to someday find. Or I like that idea. I've seen videos of people who find a cabin in the middle of nowhere and it helps them survive. I just like the idea of there being cabins out there in case.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe one day we'll be able to wrangle a crew and do something. The problem was, I mean, the forest fire ripped through there so severely that I mean it just decimated that area. So I think while there's still some standing trees. Building it is certainly, at least in that area that we kind of have access to, I think it might be a while before we're able to do that. Now, you could always build some other type of structure, a tent cabin or something else, and that's something that would work. But there is something, at least in that environment, in that setting, there is something. I mean, it's like a log cabin is just kind of where it's at. It's like,
I agree.
A tent cabin works, but a log cabin, it feels right in that.
I mean, you found a whole bunch of clay and you can make bricks, but
yeah, right, exactly. Sure.
It's a log cabin land. Let's be fair. Like that's what you want. That's what you have to see.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, a animal skin sort of tent of some sort.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
I want to first off, we have to talk about the other thing that came out of this trip. How many Eddie Bauer parkas with your name on it do you own?
I have one. I gave the other one to my dad, just given the fact that
beautiful.
It was his parka that I took up there, and I gave one to Scott. I gave one to Doc. That was a real what a thrill that was to but when I, just as a backstory there, when I came home from this trip, I borrowed my dad's parka to take with me. And obviously it goes without saying, by the time I got home, this thing it looked like it had been through a lawnmower and smelled horrendous. And I took a picture of myself in this parka, and I wrote the president of Eddie Bauer, a letter. I said, look, this parka saved my life. And the picture, it's just a mess, right? The parka. And I said, you're looking at a beautiful piece of gear. And I immediately got a response back from him, and he said, hey, if you send us this parka, we'd like to hang it in our archive room along with equipment from other famous explorers and things like that. And we'll give you a new one in return. And I was like, yeah, it sounds great. And honestly, it was a little hard for me to part with this.
Sure.
So fast forward several years later, I get another call from Eddie Bauer, and they say, hey, we want to recreate this parka and sell it as part of they were running this one-time series they called their Legends series. And we want to sell this as the David Scott parka. And I mean, my head swelled up. I was so thrilled. I was, like, I finally got my Nike shoe.
And you were in marketing too. They're like, we want to market your name. Right. You're like, absolutely. Yeah.
I was very excited about it. It was very cool. And they did, they sold it. I think they sold it it was a limited series. It was for like a year or maybe 2 years, something like that. So, it was a very cool thing.
That's amazing. That was when I read about that, I'm like, that it doesn't make it all worth it. What happened and what you learned is what made it all worth it. But that's a nice little, here you go.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's so great too is my dad bought that parka, I think the same year I was born. So this parka was already 19 years old. And I brought that up there and I destroyed it. And so the story of this Eddie Bauer parka and our dealings with them, I guess, it it involved him too. You know, he was just as much a part of this story, and so it was special in that regard. You know, we both got to share that when we went back when they were kind of unveiling this new park. I got to see the old one. You know, they brought it out,
We
and
still had it. That's
and it
awesome.
was emotional. I mean, it was like we were both sitting there with this thing, and it was an emotional moment. It was profound. You know, it was very cool. It was special.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely wonderful. I love it. I wanted to touch on you. Do you have any other plans for this story? Anything you want people to know about you? Anything they can click on? Paradise Creek. Is it paradisecreek.com? Josh normally has the link.
It's paradisecreekcabin.com.
Cabin.
Yeah.
paradisecreekcabin.com. You could find out if the story's for you, get links to the book, see additional pictures, updates on the story. Check it out. I had a great time. I had a wonderful time reading your book, and I also had a wonderful time researching you and looking over the website. Thank you, Josh. And just learning about this whole thing. I learned about a part of Canada that I thought I knew a little bit of, but finding out what the land was really like was eye-opening. I did want to ask real quick, and did you run into any predators up there? In the book, it doesn't mention, you're too far for the polar bears, too far inland, I assume. Were
Yeah.
there any other predators, wolves, bears, etc., that you had to deal with that were a problem, or just background?
Well, we really didn't know about Well, we weren't really sure, just because the nearest town for us was Churchill. It's about 120 miles away. Churchill is the polar bear capital of the world. And while no one had ever seen a polar bear that far inland, you know, you still don't really know. So you know,
Sure.
you're and polar
Only
bear or
takes one.
not, there's loads of black bear up there. Lots of wolves. You know, I think and wolverines. I think those are probably the big three. I wasn't worried about a wolverine killing me necessarily, but definitely they destroy cabins. I mean, they just destroy them. So you always travel with well, we always traveled with a rifle. Just I don't think bear spray was even a thing at that point.
I don't think it
So
was. Yeah.
so yeah, traveling with a rifle was you just always had a rifle by your side. We and other groups that had gone up for shorter periods had just been overrun with bears. They were everywhere. A couple of the groups had shot a bear. We saw one bear the entire time, and it was like a fleeting glimpse of this thing. We had on more times than I can count, for example, at the Paradise Creek cabin in the river right in front of the cabin, there would be tracks of a wolf pack that had just, you know, crossed down the river. Never knew they were there, never heard them, never saw them. But you wake up in the morning and there's like, you know, half a dozen tracks.
We had friends.
And it's exciting though. You know, that's part of the thing that makes you love being up there. You know, it's what, you know, obviously I would have much preferred to see them, but just knowing they're there, you know, it's a pretty cool thing.
There was one other thing that you were scared of, and Josh put a note on my screen. Big fish. How big were those fish?
But there was one fish that we kind of gave this fish legendary status. And I can't recall. I believe that we caught this. We called him Old Grundy, and it was a pike, and it was a massive pike. And I seem to think that we caught it, and somehow it got away. But we got a good enough glimpse of it to see this prehistoric looking creature. So anytime you go swimming in the river, you know, you just think of that's the kind of shit that's in the water. These things with a lot of teeth, and you can't see them when you're swimming. So it's that Jaws scenario where, you know, your feet are kind of dangling in the water and you're just waiting for something to kind of brush up against you. So
when you were telling the moose story, I literally had the Jaws scene in my face. You know, like He comes out of the water, he backs up, cigarette falls out of his mouth. We're gonna need a bigger boat. Like,
Yeah,
you're on a boat and this thing comes out of the water. Yeah,
exactly.
same thing.
Ex-
Yeah. Scary stuff. One other creature, not scary, Pete.
yes.
He appeared. Any other fun stories, Pete? A squirrel, right?
Pete was a pine squirrel that we, for the most part, like we would trap mice, and because the cabin's a haven for anything. I mean, it's
Magnet for you.
loaded with food and it's nice and warm. So, but Pete was one of those that's, for whatever reason, he got a pass. We kind of gave him free reign, without like letting him, go crazy on food or whatever, but scraps of bread and things like that. And he just became kind of a mascot, for us. And it wasn't as though he was tame or docile, but you'd see him kind of come in and poke his head through his little channels, however it was he was pulling that off. So yeah, that was he was kind of a cool creature. The other one, actually there is one other animal, pine martens, which is it's a weasel. It looks like a giant mink. They're fierce hunters, and there are a lot of them up there. And the first encounter that we had with one of them, we were both in the loft, we were sleeping, and you could hear something in there's kind of an extra room built onto the cabin. You could hear something rustling around in there, and it sounded big. And so I had the lantern and I went down and I opened up the door that leads into this other space. And here was this marten, and it's this, when you see them, it's this cute little furry creature, and so we stared at each other for a minute, but then he charged at me, and I like fell backwards, and it kind of freaked me out, and I shut the door, and Scott told me, he goes, now he knows that now he owns us, because he knows that you're scared of him. And so he's going to take advantage of that. And luckily we didn't have any problems with him, but yeah, they bark, and they kind of, they'll bark, and they kind of make these false charges. But then he kind of bolted at me, and I was like, whoa. And yeah, so luckily no other problems with anything else.
You painted a really good picture of what was going on there. I just wondered if Pete was more of a pet as well. Because it seemed like it, like, I understood that, like, you no doubt had stuff trying to ingress on your cabin the whole time, but
Sure.
you're like, Pete's good.
Yeah.
Because you have to
somehow
pick
he got a
one.
pass. Like and by the end of our trip, he was by far the fattest squirrel, probably in the entire North Woods. I mean, because he kind of had free reign. Again, we didn't let him just eat everything, but
Tear into stuff, but
but scraps and things like, yeah, sure, just give him to Pete and let him have them.
I hope he had stories that nobody believed. And then there was this delicious carb ball that was white and fluffy and baked.
Yeah, right.
Like, but no, you didn't.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't
I
exist.
found this magical place. It's nice and warm, and there's all kinds of food, and the people that run it are great. Yeah.
Yeah, and the mice are like, he's not. They killed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't believe a word he says.
I want to thank you. Is there anything you want to talk about or get out there? New videos or anything you're filming? Or if people want to find you, I want them to find you, or whatever you want them to see. This is your time to shine.
I think you've done an amazing job covering all the grounds. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
thank you. I'm glad I could help. Again, I do recommend. This is. It was a great book. It was a great read. It will clue you in if you have ideas of disappearing into the woods, or want to know what it's like, or you're never going to do it, but you want to know what somebody else had to deal with. This is a great story. And if you read it on my recommendation, please let me know. And you could always get a hold of David Scott on his website and let him know what you thought about it as well. David Scott, or paradisecreekcabin.com. And that was just on the screen as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Scott, David Scott, for being here. I really love talking with you. I loved reading your work. Thank you for making this happen, and thank you for your time.
It was my pleasure, and I enjoyed it as well. It was great to be here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Everybody have a great night. Be safe out there. Enjoy. This has been The Real Story with Nathaniel. Josh, take us out.